are prehistoric temples, Valletta, which is the capital of Malta, and it's a World Heritage Site, and St. John's Cathedral within Valletta. For those who've never been to Malta, you can't even see it. I had to put a circle around it so you can understand. It's between Europe, south of Sicily, and Africa. Its geographical position has always been the issue for Malta to get interest from all over the world. The population currently is 530,000. Up to a few years ago, it was 400,000. So Malta is an island where we're increasing in population, definitely not decreasing. We need to decrease. But the increase is mainly coming from foreigners, because we have one law which states that any gambling company doesn't need to pay tax. So obviously we're full of gaming companies which mess up our economy, because they come to Malta with wages from Sweden, Denmark, and all over Europe, which is much higher than the Maltese wage. So property for us is very, very expensive. So just to give you an idea, a new graduate would get something like €1,000 a month. But to rent a one-bedroom flat, it would cost you a minimum of €600 a month, and that is a semi-basement flat. If you want anything that is decent, it's going to cost you 800, and close to 1,000. So the influx of people in Malta is actually messing up a bit our economy. Now, to understand that population, the area of Malta is only 200 kilometers square, and the length is 28 kilometers and 18 kilometers wide. So it's a very highly densely populated island. The center of Malta is high. It's just like one big town, really. Now, what makes Malta interesting is the mosaic of heritage, of cultures rather, that have crossed our shores. We start with the Phoenicians, 800 BC, Romans, Byzantine, Arabs, Sicilian Christians, Knights of St. John. So you see, we are a mosaic of cultures, and every culture that has crossed our shores has left its imprint on the island. Now, it's also interesting to note, later on in my presentation, how the Maltese have selected certain cultures that they deem important to be preserved and don't respect others, really, as far as conservation goes. Language. We heard a very interesting talk about languages before, and the Maltese language is definitely one that's very, very interesting. So the Maltese have always been colonized. So number one, we don't have experience with self-governance until recently. So the original Maltese language is in 1048. We already have evidence of the Maltese language as a spoken language. I believe it started being written later on, but I'm not sure about that. In 1934, the Maltese language finally acquired official status. So prior to that, and even in the beginning of the 20th century, any legal document is written in Italian. So even when the British came to the island, any official document manuscripts were still written in Italian and then possibly in English. But Maltese was never seen officially written. In 1936, the English became the second language, and currently Maltese is the national language, while Maltese and English are the official language. So any heritage law you see, any law you see will be written in both languages. Even when we receive post from a government office at home, the electricity company, whatever, will be in English and Maltese. Even fines are issued in English and Maltese. The influence of the different cultures that have crossed our shores, we see it very clearly in our language, in the vocabulary of our language. So we have those different percentages depending on the number of years we were colonized by the different cultures. So let's say if I had to go somewhere they speak Arabic, they can understand me pretty well, because most of our vocabulary is Arabic. The Italians will pick on some words, like piazza. We say piazza in Maltese. There are many words that are similar. The least similarity you'll find is with the English language. But the language is a massive thing with us in Malta. Okay, now the methodology of my research on this was basically a desktop study. I went through documentary archives and field studies, and there you have to also understand the problem with archival research in Malta. This was part of my PhD, and my supervisor, I did my PhD in England, she was frustrated with me because it took me ages. Because most of our archival research is not on the island. It's either in the Vatican or it's in UK, and some in France. You find a lot in Italy, but in Malta we don't have water archival research. So I better head on. Colonialism. So what happened with us when we were colonized by the British, and the British left the island formally in 1979? Till then, all the education in primary, secondary school, the history island, when I was in primary school and secondary school, was European history, British history, and European geography. Very, very little about Maltese geography. The only history I knew about the Maltese was the Great Siege in 1656, when the Turks invaded Malta, the Great Siege. So when I went to university, I only thought that the Great Siege was important in our history. In fact, we have the documents in 1947 by Hugh Brown, who was a British architect and soldier, and 1986 Quinton Hughes, who very clearly state there are no books about the history of Maltese architecture. We have nothing, absolutely, very, very sporadic. So you have a country that doesn't know its own history, doesn't know its heritage. So hence you can't do any conservation projects because we don't give any value to it. When I graduated as an architect, I had never studied Maltese architecture, and we used to have students protest to the then head of the department, we need history of architecture, Maltese architecture. Now they do it. So when I graduated and I worked in an antiquity section, I had no idea when these historic buildings were built, why they were built. We had no background about them. Publications flourished in the 1990s, and there's a lot to say about that and why. There is a valid reason. We didn't have faculties of history of art in the 80s. They were all shut down. It was the beginning of the 90s that these faculties started functioning again, and you can ask questions about that later on, because I'm running out of time. So an island is created due to boundaries. Now boundaries can be tangible or intangible. So when you live on an island, the plus of being, I have to go back 1 minute. All right, colonialism. The problem with colonialism, it gives society a big sense of insecurity. Because you are living in your country, but you're never in any administrative power. That's how it worked with Maltese. We were always like the servants to our colonizer. We were not heads of departments. The most important positions were taken on by the British, because they love to live in Malta, I suppose. Islanders, on the other hand, gives a very strong sense of security, a sense of belonging to the islanders. The only thing is that you always think the grass is greener on the other side. So, as Hay knows, the insularity pushes islanders to connectivity. You always feel the need, we need to go abroad to connect with what's happening out there. So then there's this paradox in Malta, where you have on the one hand the islanders, which gives you a sense of security and strong sense of belonging and identity. On the other hand, the colonialism gives you that sense of insecurity. In fact, in the Maltese psyche, you find it a lot that the Maltese are always, if I have to go to Malta and tell them, right, we need to demolish we need to preserve the auberges, but a foreigner came across and said, we need to demolish the auberges, they will demolish the auberges, because the foreigner said it, and the foreigner is ipso facto right, and the Maltese doesn't know what they're saying. St. John's Hall Cathedral. St. John's Hall Cathedral is very interesting. It was built by the Knights of St. John. It has a very difficult history in that the ownership of St. John's Hall Cathedral to this day is not clear. Because the Knights of St. John weren't the governance of Malta. They were sent over by the Pope to try and protect Malta from any invasions from the Islamic rule. So it's a conventual church. It is not owned by the government, and it's not owned by the Catholic Church. So the way they resolved it is that they created a foundation to take care of St. John's Hall Cathedral. And it is an island within an island. The government cannot tell them, do not do this and do that. They have an authority on their own. They are literally an island within an island, and it creates a lot of problems. As you see, the architecture externally is very simple, but eventually in the middle of the 17th century it was decorated by Mattia Preti, and we have the nave which was decorated by Mattia Preti.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Now this is interesting, and I'll just brush through it. So in 1859, middle of the 19th century, the Archbishop of Malta, who also was Maltese, said we need to preserve this name, and this is where the colonialism and islandness comes into it. The Maltese Archbishop immediately went to San Luca, to the Accademia di San Luca in Italy, to get an expert to tell us how to preserve this. The British governor said, okay, you can come, but you need your Maltese artist there, Salvatore Ricallet, should be there present to see what's going on. He gave his report, and the governor once more said, no, we need a committee set up. And the governor insisted they were all Maltese. What did the Maltese do? They weren't happy with any Maltese restoring it. So the compromise was, they got a Maltese who was living in Italy. He was born in Malta, but lived in Italy. So he had experience. So there's always this, the Maltese don't trust themselves. We always look beyond. We are not good enough for ourselves. Hydrogen in Nigeria, it's very interesting because as a British colony, I'm really rushing, so you probably can't follow, but I'll do my best. So when the temples were excavated at the end of the 19th century, there was always this dilemma when were they actually constructed. Because we were under British rule, the British government preferred to say they were Phoenician, because that was closer to their history. It was only when a German archaeologist came over to the island and studied them, and he was obviously neutral ground, he said, no, these are at least 3000 BC, way before the Phoenician period. So you always have this colonialism. Beginning 21st century, we needed to do conservation projects on these temples. Now we're really close. Our first heritage law is in 2001, so beginning 21st century. And in this period, and I was part of the committee, we decided to build a shelter over the temples to protect it from the rain. And immediately, we seeked specialists from abroad, not because we thought we were incapable, but we didn't have the expertise. So on the other hand, the Maltese can be intelligent enough to say, listen, we can do this much, but we need help beyond that. And what we did with the experts that came from abroad, we put our locals working with them so that they gained experience and they learned and they went off to study, etc., etc. So we have memory. Memory is very interesting. We were discussing this morning about forgetting. If we want to remember something, we have to conscientiously forget something else. And that is the whole issue with conservation. The choices, what choices are we going to make? You have to forget. To remember, you have to forget. And that's an image of, that's Hajarim, that's an iconic, that's a very important photo now, because now you can't take that photo because we have a shelter over there. And here with this, with Hajarim, we have commemorative memory. And that is what the Maltese really identify with. This is the Opera House in Valletta. It's a very controversial situation because during the World War II, the Opera House, that is it, and Auberge de France, so Auberge de France's Knights period, they were both bombed. Auberge de France was completely destroyed. Where we have other buildings in Valletta that were destroyed in the war, belonging to the Knights period, there was money, they were reconstructed again. Auberge de France wasn't, for various political reasons. It was reconstructed in this new atrocity you can see in that photo. On the other hand, the Opera House, there was a lot of debate, and the society did not want to lose the Opera House. Why? Because it had, I'm nearly out of time. The Opera House was more of a local's memory. So society didn't want to lose it. So it's not historic value, it's local's memory they have, an associative value. It was something that the British gave us, and in our site, it put our status on. It was an opera house. So that was more important than the Auberge de France, which was built hundreds of years before, and more historically important. And this is what we've done with it now. It spent a number of years as a car park, and now it's an open-air theatre, and they did not reconstruct it. I come to my conclusions, because I'm out of time. So, when the British left, what is interesting, we did not have any post-colonial issues. We did not have that rebellion. Number one, we didn't have self-governance. So, probably there was a bit of anxiety as how we're going to manage this island. We've never managed it before. You have people going into heads of departments and governance without the experience of going up the ladder. So suddenly, bam, you're up there. And my query is that maybe the church is actually the colonial power in Malta, very strong with religion, and now we're having post-colonial effect with the church. There is a lot of anger against the church. I'll give you a short example. Let's say 10 years ago, government put out a referendum and said, do you want divorce or not? The church came out, and divorce has nothing to do with the church, because this is a legal issue. They said, if you vote yes for divorce, it's a mortal sin and you will be excommunicated from the church. And obviously, society now starts rebelling against the church, because marriage in the church and marriage by law, in Malta you have to get married twice. Well, you used to have to, the church and the law, you can't just do one. Okay, I'll just go through that quickly. So basically, in Malta we have an influence of many cultures which we've managed to translate into a culture which is Maltese. Now, if you ask what is pure Maltese identity, it is such a mosaic that many uphold the theory that the pure Maltese identity is related only to prehistoric temples. That is what's purely Maltese. But on the other hand, the other influences we have, they translated into something. You can't say something is purely British or purely Italian. It's all translated into Maltese, into Malta and the Maltese identity. Okay, sorry, I really zoomed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shirley. That was very stimulating. To remember, you have to forget. When you get into restoration and preservation of cultural heritage. And we can see how complicated that can be in a former colonial space, or post-colonial. Does it ever end? Perhaps not. Any questions for Shirley?
Yeah, we have 3 minutes for questions.
Yeah. So it's going to be like the same as a presentation. Mike, and then you. Yeah.
A question about the Catholic Church. Is it staffed with Maltese clerics, or are people coming in from all over the place?
What do you mean?
The contemporary Catholic Church, are the clerics Maltese?
Yes, mainly Maltese. And the clerics, they're losing ground. We have a lot of, let's say, monasteries where they don't have any new vocations. Many of them are hardly any new vocations coming around. So I believe that is the post-colonial. Now we're having post-colonialism.
We know that in the Pacific, the church and colonialism went hand in hand, so it's kind of interesting parallels here, but from different angles.
I visited 20 years ago. A beautiful place.
You wouldn't recognize it. It's been developed like crazy in 20 years.
And I saw the prehistoric site.
Yeah.
And actually I went to that place, but there was another one. Which was basically used as a garden for one of the hotels.
Ah, the dolmen.
Yeah.
But that's not a whole temple, they just have a megalith. And there you see the psyche, the mentality of the Maltese towards their heritage. And he's right. In fact, I never went to that hotel because I can't get myself to see part of a temple in a hotel.
That's part that was an ancient site.
Yeah.
Used as a garden of the hotel.
Yeah.
There was another, I don't know if you can call tourism, but there is another very, very important tourism area, which is the Hobai. So, as the Maltese, how do you feel that something that was built as a stage for a movie is considered more important than a historic site, which is just a garden of a hotel?
I'm not sure if Popeye Village is actually protected by law. I'm not 100% sure. That is just tourism. And tourism it was at least the main economic, it's strong economically. That's where our economy is based on. But this is, and you have to also note that Planning Authority was set up in '92. And that's when they started grading the system. And it's a carbon copy of what happens in England, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And superintendence of cultural heritage only came about in 2001. So there's this confusion, and you have to understand that the Maltese are basically Mediterranean in character, but the administration is basically British. So you have people with Mediterranean character trying to fit in a British administration, which is a bit But yeah, and we use the law completely wrong, because heritage sites should first be applied to the superintendents, saying yes, you can do these interventions on the heritage site, and then go for development to planning authority. And we do it wrong. We go first to planning authority, and they ask advice from superintendents, which isn't right.
Okay, we're out of time.
One more question and then we go?
No.
Out
of time.
Okay, it's
Sorry.
very strict. But please go and talk to Shirley. You know, it's a fascinating presentation. Thank you so much. We are not really used to think of colonialism within Europe. The Europeans were very good in going and colonizing others, but we did that to ourselves as well. So the next presentation is by Eufracio Maratas. Yes. And we are going to look at biodiversity conservation in the Philippines.
Good morning. The title of my research project is adapting Rainforestation for Small Island Biodiversity Conservation and Watershed Rehabilitation. My name is Eufracio Maratas Jr. I work for an NGO based at the Visayas State University in Central Philippines. I don't know how to use this.
The big one.
Okay. The key, very typical of small islands in the Philippines, the key problems are usually water shortage, soil degradation, biodiversity loss, and lack of livelihood and food scarcity. Probably due to the small area, as well as the deforestation that usually followed through the years of vigorous agricultural work. Because of this, I started to work as a politician in. Can I go back to?
Small one. The small button down.
There. I was looking for that. This is the map of the Philippines. You will see that red there, that is where the Camotes Islands are located. The Camotes Islands is composed of 3 small islands and 1 island. Camote is actually the dialect for sweet potato. So you'll see that the shape of the islands is like the shape of the sweet potato. Now I live in a small island, the Onson Island, the one with red. It is 32.42 square kilometers, big or small. The population is roughly about 12,000, and in 3,360 households, and the density is 390 people per square kilometer. We have half of the island has mangrove forest, which is 1.68 square kilometers, and half of it has white beaches already. And we have a watershed which is 3.87 square kilometers. That is a picture of the island. Because of those problems, I did a very small project. It ran for about a year and a half. The name of the project was Swarm Rainfall Project. It was funded by For Small Grants. It's a British funding organization. And I was provided with technical support by the local government as well as the university. The university is based in another island, which is Efate Island, about 38 kilometers from Onson Island where I live, and we have to take a boat because there's no bridge from the island to any other island. And PLTI, which is a training project at Yale University, and they partnered with Visayas State University, and the organization where I volunteered is actually an offshoot of the 11-year partnership between Visayas State University and Yale. The aim of the project was to introduce rainforestation to the people of Pilar. Basically, rainforestation is using native tree species in reforestation projects. And what I like about rainforestation is that it does not focus only on the planting of the trees and how they are planted, because first and foremost, I'm not a biologist nor am I a forester. I studied architecture in university and work as a politician, so I have no idea about trees at that time. So rainforestation basically is about planting native trees, and then you have to organize a community organization to facilitate the implementation of the restoration. And then you also have to find ways that those people who are working on the projects are given a livelihood, such as planting crops in the same area where you are planting the trees. So we plant cacao or coconuts and other crops, depending on what the people would like. With this project, we did community consultations. We organized two new community organizations who became adopters of rainforestation. The names are Marco and Apira, and there were existing organizations that we also strengthened by including them in our activities. Naase and Karfa. These are based in different villages in the island. We also did a lot of trainings. First of all, we did a rainforestation training, introduced the approach to the people. And we established native tree nursery, one only, and conducted many tree planting activities. If you notice, there's a photo there. Our tree nursery, native tree nursery, was awarded in 2018, I think, as the 4th best native tree nursery of the Philippines during a conference of the Philippine Native Plant Conservation Society. And we also assisted a community livelihood project, which was a beekeeping project. I sent the movers of that project to a university in Los Baños. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It has a big university in Luzon Island in the Philippines. So I sent them for training there. It was funded by the same grant. Now I'm doing this research project as some kind of a progress report after 10 years when the project was done. So the aim of the project was the research was to present the status of what Swarm Rainfall Project outputs after 10 years, to verify if rainforestation strategies applied were sustained, and to identify cultural practices that promoted small island resilience. I reviewed some literature because my colleagues in the university conducted research also in the island. I did personal visits and observations, as well as key informant interviews of those who participated in the project before. That is actually a photo of a book that was written by my colleagues in the institute. I observed that the trees in the rainforestation demonstration farms continue to grow with 76% survival rate. This is already good in standards of the Philippines. You will see that some of the participants in the trainings that we conducted, they have become leaders of their own projects as well. Identifying and capacitating local champions, as I have mentioned before, is a crucial step in the rainforestation adoption. This is a photo of 3 participants of the trainings that I conducted, and the one on the left is an elementary school teacher, the one in the middle is a secondary school teacher, and the one on the right is a community leader. The one on the left really has the most amazing results of his project. He has 2 rainforestation demonstration sites. He asked his students, young school children, to help him in planting and taking care of the trees. And in fact, last year he was awarded as a rainforest hero by the university, and he was featured in the regional television for that. The middle one is a secondary school teacher, and both of them are now part of the LT Environmental Leadership Program, at which I belong. And the third one, the community leader, he has his own. This is a picture of his own tree farm, which is really growing well. It's quite small, just 1 hectare, but the trees are really amazing to look at. Considering that in our island, it's a karst soil, it's very hard to grow plants and trees because of the very thin topsoil. I also observed that the partnership between BSU, LT, and thank you, has continued to strengthen, and it has given us new opportunities. And although 2 of the groups that we formed are not quite active anymore for various reasons, leadership, political changes, and the conclusions we have is that local champions really provide agile leadership to respond to unexpected changes. There are a lot of unexpected changes, especially like in 2013, we had Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and it resulted in a lot of difficulties in the island. And we continue, because of our partnership between LT, Visayas State University, and us in the island, local residents. We continue to have projects, more projects. In fact, the 11.6 hectares that we did before 10 years ago, it is now almost half of the watershed area we already reforested. And we also observed that family approach is very important in doing rainforestation, because community organization is quite difficult sometimes, especially if the residents in the island, they have had very negative experiences about organizations, and so it is important for families to include the children as well as the wife and the husband in all the activities from planting to and capacity building as well. So that is one thing we have observed that is quite effective, and we tend to do that as well in the future. So as well as giving them more opportunities to make money, because we encourage them not to cut the trees. So the people will complain, how do we survive? We are just dependent on the crops, and the crops sometimes they don't give enough income, because as the trees grow taller, the sunlight is not anymore as much. So the lesser crops they can grow. They have to choose crops that can survive even without good sunlight. So that's why we have to find other livelihood activities for them.
1 minute.
Anthony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eufracio. Any questions? Village reforestation. Yes.
This may be more of a comment than a question.
Okay.
I think it's very interesting the emphasis on the family as a unit of organization, because a lot of times development agencies try to avoid pre-existing kinship or church-based organizations in favor of a more democratic approach and actually operate to undercut the social networks that people are using to survive. And so I think that's a very important conclusion, and I want to applaud you for saying it out loud.
I agree. And one thing I really like about Rainforestation is that it's very flexible. It does not come with a step by step. So whatever we discover, we try to incorporate it, and whatever purpose that we want to do, we are free to do it. In fact, we call it now as Rainforestation approach. It used to be when it was developed by a German biologist, Dr. Joseph Margraf, and a biologist from the Philippines, Dr. Pasensya Mina. They called it rainforestation farming. But then there were criticisms that how can you farm in a forest? So it doesn't sound good. So it became rainforestation technology. And then when you talk about technology, it's like it has to be very defined, and it has to be a step by step. And it's like when you're in technology, it has to be, it sounds very scientific and So now we call it just an approach, because it's more like you have a free hand on how to interpret and how to do your thing. Because different sites have different demands. Different people have different way of doing things, as long as the basic principles are there. And that family approach has been quite effective, as I observed.
Weforestation? That is the word of the day for me. That is an amazing.
It's actually to differentiate the old way of doing reforestation in the Philippines, which was using imported species of trees.
Yeah.
So just to differentiate it, we call it rainforestation. So it is the rainforest that we are trying to restore.
Yeah. How wonderful, and how a great way to go away from that rainforest farming. What? We've done enough damage, I think. Thank you very much, Eufracio.
Thank you.
Presentation is coming from the Pacific. We are staying in the Pacific. And we have a presentation from Vanuatu.
That's another
On a combination of urban planning as an innovative approach to managing environmental issues. So we have the urban and the environmental coming together. So that would be really an interesting presentation.
This one?
Yeah.
There's no name. So this is right. That's the next, and the backward and point. Okay, you are good to go.
Good morning, everyone. The last time I was communicating, so I tried to present what I have here. First of all, thank you for the organizers who allowed me to do a short presentation on my research proposal. So please get in touch with me as I proceed on with my presentation. First of all, my name is Jamesly Tavuti. I came from Pacific Island State, country called Vanuatu. I'm a first year master student at the University of New York and student history. specializing in infrastructure and heritage, so that's the actual studies of mine. And the title of my presentation is Urban Planning as an Innovative Approach for Managing Environmental Issues in an Insular City of Port Vila, Efate Island, Vanuatu. So Port Vila is the actual capital city in my small island in Vanuatu. This is my brief outline of my presentation. Firstly, I want to speak basically on the profile of Port Vila and the overview of the cities, and basically give the importance of the urban plan approach, and also refer to some environmental impacts, implications happening in Port Vila city, and also give a scenario of super city as a basic scenario of this super city is close to my country, so I provide a basic example from how they manage their environmental issues. And then I also present the goals, objectives, and the city science here. And lastly, the significance of the study concluded by a brief statement. Okay, the basic profile of Port Vila. Port Vila city is located on the island of Efate, which is on the central part of Vanuatu, which is actually Vanuatu consists of roughly about 82 islands, and Efate Island is on the central of the generally all what can you say is the location of island. So Port Vila is the center of those islands which will be called as a capital city. It declares as a municipality out of Vanuatu its independence in the July 1980, and it was formally joined by Rainforestation during the olden days. So it's like a mixture of cultural ethnicities and diversity, also doing things because we are colonized by British and French. So it's very interesting when you came to Port Vila or when you come and explore the landscape of doing things. Yes, also Port Vila plays a crucial role in Vanuatu's development, serving as a commission, culture, and governance center. So I just provide some basic pictures on the slide which shows what Port Vila consists of. Like we are more into a tourism hub. We attract a lot of tourists, which is part of our economy, cash flows and everything. So it's one of the tourism destinations in our country, and also people basically livelihoods and mostly about farming and all those things, and also we have our small towns also, which is called Port Vila, and also our central government is also located in Port Vila city as well. So this is a basic series of pictures which will be giving an idea how Port Vila look like. Some complicated facts about Port Vila. The urban footprint is roughly about 24.3 kilometers, and also at the latitude of 59 meters high. And the classification of the climate mostly is tropical rainforest. The highest temperature recorded is 37.2 degrees. Average rainfall is 1,500 to 4,800 because it's mostly a tropical island state. So yeah, the population is 84,895, which is more in the greater Port Vila area, estimated in 2014 by our national census. Population density is roughly about 3,500 passengers per kilometers. The household size is 4.8, and urban population average age is 23. The region there is mostly Christian, 90% of the change Christians, and 10% is mostly Hindus and other religions. So The language there is basically Islam is a national language and French and English. Literature about 98%. On the map slides you can see where the location of Port Vila is, in South Pacific, close to Australia, New Zealand. This is the sketch of the map showing the different states zoning within the Port Vila metropolitan area. So, and it's through decisions divided into different walls. The overview of my research is to focus on the application of urban planning as a tool to address environmental challenges in Port Vila City. By proposing sustainable solutions, the study aims to mitigate environmental concerns and enhance the well-being of the community in this insular city. Why we consider urban planning is a better approach, or why I consider urban planning as a better approach in doing research to look at the environmental issues or look at the overall issues of climate change and those things that contribute to. First of all, in terms of sustainable development, urban planning will encourage the use of renewable energy sources, promote energy efficiency, prioritize public transportation options, and facilitate development of new spaces. Secondly, climate change adaptation. Urban planning will assist Port Vila in adapting to climate change by implementing coastal protection measures, integrating green infrastructure and level strategies to mitigate the effects of extreme weather events and big waves. Thirdly, resilient. We are resilient people, so we must into doing things in the resilient way. So resilient urban planning will enhance the situations by improving infrastructure, fostering social and economic development, promoting participation in planning and decision-making processes. Now I move to the factors that contributes to the environmental problem. So Port Vila is a young town city. And at the moment it's growing, so people are moving in. We have few big issues in terms of urbanizing. So this is some of the factors that contribute to our environmental problems. We have basically a high percentage of urban growth, industrialization, small scales, booming. Transportation systems, urbanization and use, integrated waste management, high energy consumption, water management issues, lack of green space, vulnerability to climate change impact. So this is more like a broader concept of applying to the factors that contribute to our environmental problems. And the slide shows some of the real pictures or some of the real challenges issued in Port Vila. Littering is one of the big issues at the moment. We have some and also water pollution, oceans, sewage leakages, which mainly something to do with maybe our poor urban planning approaches or system or policies doesn't work, so it's the gas and everything. I think everything is just per cut and doesn't relate. That's why we come up with those issues. So my research is basically to find out how urban planning can link it, to incorporate those ideas, how we can fix those issues or those conflicts. We have better law, we have the legislation, we have the bylaws, we have the policies, frameworks, but this doesn't work. So the issues are still there. So some of pictures here. Purposeful developments for people moving in, more development subdivisions, developers come in. And also, I think I picked up this slide, these pictures from the newspapers 2 weeks ago. Our government is looking into ban high emission vehicles because our city is small, more imported vehicles coming in, so studies shows we are starting to get a place of air pollution in a small town, so it became a chaos to us now. So the government started to study into how we can ban some vehicle types of buses with more into public transportation, which such to make sure to lower the cases of these higher issues of pollution in our small town. Let's look at the implications. I already made those factors. So the implication is the degradation of natural resources, public health issues, concerns, climate stability, pollution and aquatic problems, Efate Islands, losses of cultural heritage, economic loss, rehabilitation. So this is some of the general approaches, concepts which more link to the implications of our environmental issues, which actually are happening now. I move to give you some scenarios from Fiji. Fiji is our nearby countries. So Fiji is maybe ahead of us, in terms of development and applying frameworks and strategies and enforcement and those things with combined. So Fiji is always up. So we learn a lot from Fiji, our neighboring countries. In Fiji, in Suva, this is how Fiji apply urban planning strategies to reduce or to manage its environmental issues. The Suva City Council is promoting the use of public transportation, which something we didn't really have.
3 minutes.
With something we didn't really have there. So it promotes the public use of public transportation. And also investing in renewable energy, more into solars and reduce the use of biofuel, managing solid waste management in terms of recycling and composting efforts, and also protecting environments in terms of creating parks, planting trees and resource conservation. So this is something we should learn from Suva, which is our nearby country, so we learn a lot from them. So I think it's the best city to get the comparable studies to compare to get some good recommendation from them. The goal of my study is to seek to consider the importance of planning as a tool for managing environmental issues. The objective is to determine the influence of planning on environmental management generally, establishing how Port Vila insurers can use urban planning in managing of its environmental problems. Lastly, suggesting recommendations for effective urban planning in managing of environmental problems in Port Vila. The methodologies are more like using both the methodologies for collecting the information. Soon the information will be collected, hopefully next year. We're going to do some surveys, data collections, do some property studies, and also some interviews. We provide questionnaires, focus groups, discussions, and also documentations, analysis. So this is basically method approaches to be used to conduct for collecting information for these research. The rapid account of the overall scenarios of how research is going to be started from the production to the end where the unit and conclusion and recommendation. So this is the brief outline of how my research design will look like and work according to what is being presented. And this is the collaborators which are more into who will be what will to collect information to combine the research more into Port Vila Council, the government institutions, departments, non-government organizations, researchers, communities, and social groups and individuals. So that's the significance of studies more into influencing policies and decision-making processes in various levels to improve environmental management through innovative strategies and practices to protect sky, properties, and environment from climate-related challenges to contribute to a more sustainable future for Port Vila and inspiring similar initiatives regionally to facilitate knowledge sharing and application of successful approaches in their cities. To empower and engaging local communities, sustainable urban planning and environmental conservation. So this is the series of the studies. Conclusion: urban planning is an important tool for managing chronic issues in cities where our case, Port Vila. It can address other challenges, including rapid urbanization, waste management, water pollution, climate change, air pollution, land use, and biodiversity. By using urban planning, Port Vila can become a more resilient, sustainable, and livable city. So, thank you very much for listening. And this is the brief presentation of my research. Let's say it's still a proposal, I'm still working on it. So, thank you very much for listening.
Well, esteemed professors, could could we help this aspiring island scholar to do his research? Any recommendations, suggestions, comments?
I just have a question, just for clarification. Thank you, James. I think you have a very interesting approach looking at the case study in Sula. But have you determined already how much urban planning has taken place, maybe in the past, or what's what has been done? The current situation, yes.
In my case, in my country.
Yes.
In the country. Actually, at the moment, I think we didn't really have a proper urban planning strategy, more into I can say there's no comprehensive urban planning strategy in place at the moment. And also we have contradictions between boundaries between the several provincial government and Port Vila Municipal City Council. So it's hard for Port Vila is looking into expanding its boundaries and zoning to expand, like they call it Greater Port Vila, but they have the conviction of between the provincial government. So they still, so in terms of expanding and creating a more urban planning strategies, I think there's a big situation there. So at the moment, I don't think we have but I actually asked from those personnel from the municipalities, they didn't have any document which is in place. For our other cases, like Buckenfield Town, which is our other town, they have what we call a physical planning document, zoning control document. They have it, but for Port Vila, they didn't have one, which is something which is not really, like we can say, it's not, we are not on the right track. That's why we face a lot of issues. We have the bylaws in place. We have the Department of Environment, which does a lot of works. We have municipalities, we have a department, we have the Department of Urban Affairs. We have some frameworks, but there is no collaboration between how those strategies and frameworks, they align or they work together to address those issues. I think there's a gap between those different institutions. That's why I'm thinking of conducting research to find some recommendations. How do those institutions gonna work together to address them? Maybe something to do with more into consultation, to do more into the communities and the research of Port Vila, how they have the ownership of creating a better plan for the future. I think it's something that at the moment they're still using the system of up-down approach planning. But in terms of, at the moment, like in terms of a more sustainable, livable town or city, I think community participation of creating their own urban centers or commercial hub or urban town cities, I think that's the better approach, which more small island states should be looked into that strategy or that approach. Instead of depending on the national government, getting the ideas from the outside consultancies and consultants to do the work, I think it's a better approach. Like, for example, in Japan, they work more with the local communities, residents to design the cities. That's why, at the end of the day, they feel ownership of their town. Like I showed you, there's a big issue of littering. There's a big issue of beach littering. It shows that the communities or the people living around Port Vila, they didn't have the ownership of looking after the environment of the town. So between these, I think developing urban planning strategies or plans, there's a gap there. The communities or the residents of Port Vila should come in to create their own plan. So at the end of the day, they will be more like they own the plan and they own the actual activities on the ground. Yeah, I think it's something to do with, we have big weaknesses in the municipality institution. Corruption is one of the big issues there, so wrong people at the wrong place, that's why those issues came out. So yeah, we have better people which they have more knowledge and expertise in terms of urban planning, but when we have a weak system of governance, this is bringing all these chaos in place. Wrong people in the wrong place. They didn't have the capacity of thinking or proactive to create a better approaches or create a better urban environment. So that's why we end up with this house.
I agree. Your research definitely is very significant because there is a big gap.
Yes, because I live in Port Vila, so I see all these issues. So
you know what's happening.
I don't know what's happening. So
in a lot of Pacific Islands, urbanization is happening so fast.
Yes.
And so we have this phenomenon of shanty towns, settlements as they call them, which they are not being urban planning, waste management solution that is absent. So this research is extremely important.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Jamesly. Any other questions you can have about the
So it's there and you're all hungry. Me too, I'm very quick. And I'm Yan Yan from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, first year PhD students. And today what I'm going to present is Waiting Time, the Brocade on Hainan Island. So I think first of all I need to introduce a little bit what is the Brocade. But then I realized that my whole research actually is about to find out what is it. I put some photos here, and they probably could represent maybe your imagination or your feeling to the Brocade. But what I want to discover is actually the black area, like the reflection from it, what it could be formed in the future, like how they can live their own timeline in this global globalization or this global axis of time. So I will make more elaboration later. Okay, we'll go to next. First, I want to clarify the political role of craft actually in this capitalism. This is actually pretty clear because a lot of researchers and scholars have already pointed out in Asia, in Europe, all around this world, especially now, in this capitalism society, we can see a lot of political power from craft. For example, their slow production and also their repair skills. And also the knowledge of the materials, so they don't waste their broken clothes, for example, they repair, and also they care about the environment and so on. So it's actually very important. However, in China, in the last 50 or 70 years, China mostly spent a lot of time to abandon the tradition because we have to hurry up and catch the US and so on. So for now, if we want to recover the craft, we already find that we are really in this Western direct time. So all are in the later development, and this points to the speed, innovation, and military competition. And it's unlike actually in Japan, we can feel the craft development very well because in 20th century or at the end of the 19th century, there is a Japanese art which called Liu Zongyue. I forgot the Japanese name. Yeah, and so he founded a folk craft movement to emphasize the daily use of craft. So our daily use is the kind of the core of our everyday craft, but not the royal craft, souvenir or whatever. So I think Japan has, thank you. But it's very different in China. So we just started to think about this question. So this global axis of time reflected in a craft. In China, it's actually national and cultural industry. I'm not saying that it's not good, but my question is fit for China situation. For example, this cultural industry, we can see a lot of souvenir, I would say, made of craft, and selling as the craft is good and to sell them, but it's very low quality. And most of the time, the craft people became kind of the tool of the designer. The designer design a pattern and you produce it. So that is basically how it's going on in China. But I'm not saying that we need to go back. Because every time when we talk about the craft or the cultural heritage, people will challenge that why you can use very clean toilet and they have to use this dirty, that is very typical Chinese toilet. But I'm not saying that if we don't go this way, it doesn't go back, but we can discover our own routine to development. So that is basically what I want to do in this research. So in this line, I want to kind of based on these questions to discover its order. So what is it? So what is the Brocade, which I will introduce later, and how it is represented by the outside world and reflected, and kind of construct imagination of it and sell it and devalue it actually. And also like in this tension, what is forgotten, appropriate, and still hunting around, and which might feed us in our contemporary life or even the future. But it's ambitious. I haven't reached that point. So okay, fine, we go into this context. So Hainan Island. I don't know if you heard of it before, but if you ask most of the people in China, they might, the first impression would be like the tourism site. So we go to serving and also like all like the tourism business was very vivid there, but most of them are around like the beach side. So when I'm done research by this community, they are in the mountain. This is called Five Finger Mountain in the middle of Hainan Island. I don't know if you can count 5 fingers. Yeah, so they are in the mountain area. So that is how it's why they are living in the mountain area. So I think in 206 BC, like from Han Dynasty, the Han Chinese has already started to try to conquer this place, this island, and also the people, the indigenous people, which is the minority. So I forgot to introduce like this group of people there. So kind of this is the routine of their movement, like from the seaside and gradually into the mountain. It's mountain, you know, it's a natural area for the attack or for the outsider somehow. So until like Ming and Qing dynasty, they already live in the middle and gradually like really smaller scale. And also like after the Republic of Chinese establishment in 1950, Hainan is the last one to be recovered by Mao. And then like in the following like 70 years, it becomes like a tourism or an economic zone and the tourism island, free trade port, and so on. So that is how Hainan is constructed by the government. And this group of people, like the community in my research, they are Li minority and they are divided by 5 dialects, depends on their language, and also their the clothes, like you see like in the right corner. And so that is how like the history and also like the living situation of this group of people and their transformation. For 2000 years, the China and also like the foreign influence has already had a lot of impact on them, but still, I mean, like though like there are a lot of tourism happening around the beach side, still like in the middle part, some traditions are kept. And I wonder if like, because you know this long time development on Hainan Island has already reflected a lot of traits on the Brocade. So basically this craft can really reflect and also have a lot of, I don't know how to say it, like the traces to reflect different dynasties and also like modernities and so on. So it's very complicated medium. And also in this, all these traces, I wonder if it could find like the way to form its own direction of development.
7 minutes.
Okay. So what is the Brocade? So when you ask people what is the Brocade or what is desk, for example, they might say that how it looks like and how it is made. For the first step, you got the wood and then you cut it and you made it by machine. So like the steps 1, 2, 3, 4. But I realized actually in the process of the Brocade making, for example, from the coloring to the weaving, they are kind of overlapped. So it's not really step by step. I think step by step is also like a Western lineage description and it's already like inherited by us. And so I divided their knowledge into, for now, like 4 parts. For example, like this environmental knowledge. So basically, if you do this weaving, you have to really know your surroundings. You have to really know the cotton, to when to plant it and when to cover it. And also like for coloring, they use this ginger, small ginger. And also you have to really know about your environment. And also what I didn't put is that you also have to know like your friend island, for example in Philippines or like in Taiwan, because they have very similar patterns. But this is just my hypothesis, haven't to research on it. So you really need to know like how your environment is looks like, and also like for the body language. So it's mostly like relation lab. It's not like a linear lab. For the body language, so this is the tools they use, like almost knives, sticks, and these very simple tools. And they just can weave this very complicated textile. And also like for these complicated patterns, they have to really plan it before in head. Like they don't draw or they don't write, they don't have writing language. So I don't know how they create these patterns, and also interviewed the woman. She also doesn't know how her ancestor created these patterns, but I just guess it's from their environment, and also like the ancestors, for example, like here, for the non-living being, like their relation to it. The upright corner is the 大力神文, this like stronger power women pattern. So to memorize the people like who saved all their life, it's a myth. So based on that, they created this pattern, and also like in some rituals, they also use this their quilt like made by the Brocade to memorize the ancestors. So actually, there are a lot of stories on it, and for example, this one is community knowledge, and you really have to like work with other friends, because working alone is very boring for them. So they need to know the people who live around, and also this called the Wu translated from the language, which means that the boys and girls will love each other, and the girls will weave the Brocade, and then if she likes the boy, she will give it to him, something like that. So it's a lot of interesting stories and also knowledge around, but somehow I think it's kind of devalued sometimes. For example, this one is I found like how they teach others to learn the Brocade. Like it's kind of put the patterns on the computer and print it out, and people learn from it. And I don't know if you could, I haven't had a very systematic analysis yet, but I feel like this, the knowledge which I mentioned above kind of really cut off, and the only symbol is this pattern, and most of the weavers actually kind of, they don't remember what does this mean. That is very, I don't know, pity. I mean, they couldn't really tell the story of the patterns of it anymore. So I think I'm not really criticizing this technology development, but I'm just thinking it might not proper for this Brocade development. And so after have an overview of what the Brocade is, from a non-linear way, I might to think about how it was represented by outside world.
3 minutes.
Okay. Very quick. So talking about representations, there might be a lot of medias. What I want to do is kind of wrap the timeline. I don't follow like a paper and a video and the 20th century, like, I don't know, architecture or whatever, but I prefer like to use like different levels of memory and to compare the tension between to see what is that. Based on the knowledge we have learned from like the last photo. But this part I haven't done enough analysis yet, and maybe I just tell some stories. For example, like this newspaper. It was published in 1940 for the Brocade exhibition, and it's very clear on this newspaper that they want to colonize this island, so they need to know them, so they organize this exhibition. It's super clear, like colonization areas, and also like So for example, like for this one, this group of people who are the inheritors of the intangible cultural heritage in China, and very shining card to represent this craft, because they are kind of like to shape them into the public people somehow, or not more than like craft women anymore. For example, in this photo, I was visiting this place, and then the people who are responsible for this activity like invite some of them come, the women come, and then to kind of perform this weaving for the mayors or so-called professions. And it's very interesting because I saw a lot of women like before this activity, they change their clothes into this very traditional one, because usually actually don't wear this anymore. They wear the same with us, because this quality of clothes is already very low and it's very hot, especially in this warming. I don't know if it is connected to this. So they normally don't wear this. And only when people are coming and visit and take photos, they will wear these clothes to show them. And also it's very strange, because before they were facing the window to get more light so that they can really see this textile. But it's not good for photography, so they were asked to change their direction to the dark side so that they can catch more light by the camera. So I think all these are very interesting materials, and also like when you are in an exhibition, this live performance by the craftswomen, and also like in the videos or like in the ethnographic text and images from the Western perspective, how they represent the Brocade. And what you can see from this contrasting directions, the power or the political power conflicts and encounters, and what we can discover later. Okay, time up. I'm gonna finish. So what I'm going to do is to try to, like in this fragments, try to find out what is behind it, and if they can form their own cosmos, but not like this global linear cosmos. And I also hope that our like island study or whatever, like craft study, they can actually also be looking for it to go for like a diverse islandness or a diverse cosmos. So I just end up with Lawrence, when I hear about people complaining about being lonely, then I know what has happened, they lost the cosmos. So I just end up here. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. What a fascinating presentation. Any questions? Comments? Yeah.
Oh, I've got a very loud voice, so I can speak up. Thank you for your presentation. As a maker myself, and coming from a family, we spoke the other night, we have Cook Islands tea by course. Yeah. So I saw in your presentation a lot of similarities. What I'm really interested in is the number of makers that are still alive, still passing on, and also how does this knowledge get passed on to the next generation? Because you mentioned it's created in these community groups. Yes. Are there formal classes? Is it more organic that you pass from sister to sister to mother? So I'm quite keen to understand that making process and how it's being developed and preserved as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's a really good question to give me more time to explain it. Sorry, the first question is, so how many people are alive or like knows this knowledge? I think very less. I mean, there are a lot of young people who know this, but it's very like superficial knowing. Like I know how to wear this, but as I said before, they really don't know the outside world. And also, in terms of the women who like really know deeply of this, they normally like already like 80 years old and they don't speak like Mandarin. They have their own language, so it's also creates very like a barrier between communication, and it's hard for them to tell like the Han Chinese, or like they don't have a very good impression of us as well. And also like for their traditional teaching, it is in the family. Like I give my daughter the skills and so on, like that. But for now, it already entered into the college, and that is, and the paper I showed is how they teach the students. They use that one very simplified knowledge to teach the next generation. But of course, there are still, some people who are keen to learn it, but I'm not really sure they are for this title of inheritor of intangible cultural heritage, or like if they are really want to kind of pass on this knowledge. So I'm still waiting like to discover and how this education knowledge is formed and passed on and changed somehow. Yeah, thank you.
Well, in that sense, the Japanese definition of cultural heritage is more relevant than the UNESCO definition of cultural heritage, because here we're talking about passing on that heritage and storytelling, especially in groups that they are oral based, right? Not written language.
Yeah, exactly.
I was actually impressed with the Japanese definition of cultural heritage. Any other comments? But we have lunch waiting. We are a little bit late, but please engage with our our presenters if you have any more questions. Thank you very much.